From the center of the universe, Toronto, Ontario, Canada, this is the SDM Show with your host, Rob Cairns. The SDM Show focuses on business, life, productivity, digital marketing, WordPress, and more. Sit back, relax, grab your favorite drink, and enjoy the show. Here is Rob.
Hey everybody, Rob Cairns here. I'm the founder, CEO, and chief creator of Amazing Ideas at Stunning Digital Marketing. In today's podcast, I have Jeff Greenfield with me, and we're going to talk all about analytics. This is one show you want to catch. Sit back, relax, enjoy the show. The SDM Show is brought to you by Stunning Digital Marketing, the digital marketing concierge that helps you put all your marketing pieces together. We are your marketing experts. We are also your WordPress security experts and know how to lock down a website and protect yourself from bad actors. So contact us at Stunning Digital Marketing today. Hey everybody, Rob Cairns here. And today I've got Jeff Greenfield with me, and we're going to talk all about a thing called analytics. How are you, Jeff?
I'm doing great, Rob. Thank you so much. Excited to be here. And yeah, analytics, a lot of people don't think it's sexy. I happen to think it's sexy as hell.
Yeah, I agree with you. Numbers, you're either a data cruncher or you're not a data cruncher, right? And it's
Yeah.
it's one of those. And I can think of days, I was thinking back to my days in college where I took statistics courses, and some people like stats and some people don't like stats. I think analytics are very much in the same ballpark.
They are. For me, it's exciting, especially in the marketing space, because as a marketer, you always want to know, like when I talk to other marketers, people always want to know, hey, what's working these days? What's the latest and the
Yeah.
greatest? And for me as a marketer, being in this space, I get to be in the middle of some of the most amazing ad campaigns around the world and see actually what's working and what's not working, and see marketers take some of them take some huge risk, see some pay off, some not pay off. It's to me, that's sexy.
Yeah, and what I would agree is, before we kind of dive in the background and stuff, I think a lot of it is if you don't know where your numbers are, how do you make it better? Like really, how do you do that? So I'll take something very simple. You've got a website and somebody goes to a web page and they said, I'm struggling. I said, really? Do you know what your numbers are? Do you know how many visitors you're getting to what pages? And they look at me and say, I don't know. And I hate to tell you, in the small business space, and you probably know this already, Jeff, most people don't know what their numbers are.
No, they don't at all. And it's not just that, but when you start to pan the camera back and look at the bigger picture on any business,
Mhm.
it's amazing to me how many people don't know the fundamental numbers that are behind their business. And that's not even in small business, it's even in some large businesses as well too, because
Yeah.
the larger the business, the more lines of business are involved, and it just gets very, very confusing very fast.
Yeah. I've got a client, I should say soon to be former client. You know how that happens. And
Yes.
one of the things he's been doing is complaining he's not getting any sales. And I took a quick look a while ago and I've said to him, well, I think you should do this and this and this. And he had no clue that he was actually getting the traffic he was getting to his website. He was blaming everything else. And I said to him, but you're getting traffic. I can prove that based on the analytics and the numbers. We'll come back there. And in this case, I said to him, you know what the problem is? It's not how you're getting the traffic. It's your problem is your offer isn't as compelling enough. And he looked at me, he's so old school, and he looked at me and said, my offer's good enough. I must not be getting traffic. And I'm looking at these numbers saying, no, like the proof's in the pudding, right? No.
Yeah,
Anyway.
well, it's also comes down to the fact that I think most marketers today lack the foundation that you need to
Mhm.
understand how marketing actually functions. And so you get a lot of folks who jump to conclusions, oh, this has to be the problem, or this is what's working,
Mhm.
because they don't understand how marketing actually works. And if
Yeah.
you don't understand that, it's easy to go off in a wrong direction.
Yeah. I think the problem with a lot of marketers today is they have very little technical skills too. and I find that a lot. I come from a very technical background. I started in the tech business as a programmer, believe it or not. Um, then I went on to doing support in business for a large scale hospital for like over 25 years. I worked on major projects. So I have a bit of a different background because I have a very tech centric background. And I think a lot of marketers, I'm not saying they need that type of background, but they need some technical background and they really don't. They don't. And that's a problem, I think.
Yeah, it's gotten more complicated and it
Hmm.
seems to get more complicated every year. Where I see is one of the fundamental weaknesses today is that most marketers today rely upon Google Analytics
Yep.
as their source of truth, which is click-based.
Hmm.
And so that we have a whole generation of marketers that believe that you invest dollars to buy clicks and clicks lead to leads or clicks lead to sales.
Hmm.
And that skips this whole other marketing concept. It's very lower funnel because marketing, the way it actually works is we invest dollars to buy eyeballs, to get
Yes.
attention.
Yep.
And those are called impressions. And when that impression builds awareness and attention up to enough of a level, people will walk into your store. And for most people, their store's online, and that's clicks. So most marketers, they forget about the other stuff that happens and they think that all they're doing is buying clicks. And that ends up them not being able to see the forest for the trees at all.
Yeah, and I don't realize that for somebody to even buy or look at the product, it usually takes 8 to 15 touches, however you do it, whether it's a video, whether it's a clip, whether it's a post on Facebook or X. So, and then these click-based marketers will say that's a waste of dollars. Well, I'm going to break it down very simple. There's a reason when you turn on the TV that Coca-Cola advertises on a sporting event 4 times every hour. So in a 3 hour sporting event, that's 12 ads. It's called repetition, repetition, repetition. And the more you put it in front of somebody, the more they remember. And I think that's what some of these newer marketers are missing, truthfully.
Well, especially since you can't measure it with how they're doing
Yep.
things. Like for example, one common complaint that I hear from folks is they go to conferences or they read the news articles that say CTV is working for their competitors
Mm-hmm.
and they're trying to figure out how is it that it's working for them because they try it and they don't see the results in GA. They log in and because there's no tab in there for CTV. There's no tab in there
Yep.
for any non-clickable media like podcast advertising or digital out of home or traditional linear television. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's funny because most of them learned about analytics in college and they learned how to use Google Analytics, which is now GA4,
Yep.
and they've come to trust that. And so there's a change that folks have to go through. And I find that the hardest thing with marketers and with any human is is this concept of change. We tend to shy away from any change.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There seems to be some fear or pain associated with it. Hey, I've got the way I like doing things, and
Yep.
I don't want to do it any other different way.
Yep.
And what's happening though is that marketing is getting more complicated. There's more channels that are not clicks. There's more places where people are buying stuff that GA won't go, like Walmart and Amazon and
Mm-hmm.
all these other walled gardens. So the problem is that marketers are at this time where they're going to be forced to change whether they want to or not in order to do their job at
Yeah.
just even at a minimum level.
And clicks aren't everything. Like I hate to tell people, I was reading an article on the weekend. There was a Burger King was doing a really interesting concept. If you had the app on your smartphone and you walked into a McDonald's, do you know the Burger King app in certain areas would start advertising you discounted Whoppers if you bought right now and went and picked it up
Right.
while you were there? And this wasn't even based on numbers or analytics. This was based on what we call geofencing. So
Right.
basically, they were taking your longitude and latitude location saying, oh, you're in a McDonald's, so let's just feed you an ad saying, hey, you're in a McDonald's, come buy from us and buy it now and we'll give you a big discount. I mean, to the point they were offering these Whoppers for like, I heard in some cases of $1. Like, well, you
Yeah,
know,
people actually, I read about that. People actually got out of the drive-through or walked out of the store and
yeah,
went across the street to pick up their
yeah.
their discounted Whopper. It was a genius campaign without a doubt, utilizing data and technology in order to win the business.
Yep. There's other smart ways. So do you get involved in this whole world of analytics? Some people would say, oh, it's a nerd things that like numbers. I would humbly disagree, but how'd you get in, Jeff?
I got into analytics primarily because I was in the world of branded entertainment and product
Okay.
placement. I would put stuff in TV and film and did some very large scale campaigns for clients. And one of my clients was a publicly traded weight loss company,
Hmm.
and they were doing work with them, early branding work for YouTube. This was 2005.
Before Google
And
bought it, then
no, I think when did Google acquire it? Was it
25,
2000?
24, somewhere in there. Yeah.
Oh, right around there. I think it was part of Google at this point. And the CEO who I became friendly with said, hey, can you look at the numbers that I have for my ad agency? They just don't seem to make sense. And I looked at them and he was right. They didn't make sense. The click-through rates were a little crazy. The cost per click was a little off. And I said, yeah, it doesn't make sense. And he's like, well, can you take this over for me? And I'm
Hmm.
like, well, listen, I'm not a media buyer, but I can manage the process. So I brought in some of the top media buyers in the country to take over this media
Hmm.
buying and manage it. But immediately I was thrown all of these problems. The first problem was is that there were five display partners doing about 2 billion ad impressions a month, and they were all on a CPA basis. So the
Hmm.
client was only paying for each conversion. And the problem was is that for every conversion we had, every partner was claiming credit. So for every sale, we had like five mothers claiming that's my child. So we were paying out five times. So that was the first thing. And so I said, well, wait a second. I think I can come up with something. Because the first solution was I went to the CEO and said, you need an ad server. And he said, what is it going to cost? And I talked to DoubleClick. And for that many impressions, it was $80,000 a month. And he said, no, I'm not going to do that. You
Yeah.
need to come up with something else. So I had a tech team that was working on another project. I pulled two of them off and started building out a rudimentary tag solution for this. And each week there was something else that kept coming up. So this project expanded from being something that I thought we would fix in a week. It ended up being about 6 or 7 weeks. And it solved 90% of the problems the client was having. And I thought this was a solution just for this client. And then I talked to a friend about it, and he didn't believe what I had created because he said
Yeah.
that this was the problem the industry was looking to solve. And so before I knew it, what I created, what I thought was just for this one client, turned out to be a business that other people needed. And that was the genesis of my first entry into this space with a company called C3 Metrics, which was one of the first enterprise MTA providers. And what we did then is we would put tags on the website, tags in all the
Yeah.
ads, and collect hundreds of billions of data points every single month so that we could then use machine learning to figure out what was working and what wasn't working. But it required collecting granular user level data. So
In
I
essence,
scaled
in
that.
essence, the same thing as doing like UTM parameters today, right? And basically that's what you're doing.
Well, for one aspect, for the site, yes, for the
Yeah.
clicks, but also we had a tag that would go into the ad server. We had a
Hmm.
tag that would go on Facebook when it
Okay.
first started, a
Yeah.
tag that went on Amazon. So we were collecting not only every click, but also every single ad impression.
Yeah.
And then ultimately, we also started to determine the difference between ads that were actually exposed and ones that were actually in view on the screen so we could
Okay.
look at viewability as well. So I scaled that company up to about 65 employees and
Mm.
exited that company right before COVID, the end of 2019. And I thought after 12 years, I'm done with measurement. I'm not going to go back. And
Famous last
then,
words.
yeah, and then COVID came, and with it came all of these privacy regulations, the famous iOS update,
Yes.
the, the concept with Chrome where they're going to take cookies away, all of these
Mm.
things started coming up. And what that did is, and then all these walled gardens where you couldn't put a view tag, you can only collect the clicks. And that what that did is it created an environment where this industry of attribution was no longer going to function because it required collecting 100% of the data. And now you can only collect just clicks. You couldn't collect everything.
Yeah.
And so I saw an opportunity to come back in with a privacy centric solution that actually didn't collect any user level data, but did even a better job than what we did before. And that's what led me into building Provalytics.
No, that's really cool. That's a good story. And the thing is, this whole data capturing thing is it's just a minefield. I mean, you look what's going on in the industry right now. We got issues with Chrome. We got the US government looking into Google saying, are we going to make you sell it or not? We got all kinds of stuff there. We got issues going on with everything Google owns because I think Google's going through the antitrust case that Microsoft went through in the 1980s. I really do right now. It's almost identical. We saw this in the U.S. with phone companies. We know it happened with AT&T. They got split up. Then where is the communications in the States right now? It's a mess because of that. I believe it's a mess. Maybe I'm wrong, but I think it's a bit of a mess. Um, so I think we got some issues going on there, and we've got, of course, the EU, the European Union, in there saying, "Wait a minute, why are you capturing analytics? We're concerned for our users, but that's okay if you want people to start paying for every dime and put everything behind a wall garden, and you can do what you want, right?" I mean, and we've seen the newspaper industry try and do that, and we know how much that's backfired in the face, like in a big way. It hasn't worked. So there's that too. Um, what's the typical with Provalytics? What's the typical size of your client? What are they looking for, and that kind of stuff for ads measure, not ads measurement, analytics measurement. Sorry.
Yeah, most of our clients are spending north of 10 million or more per year.
Okay.
The challenges that they face primarily revolve around not knowing what numbers to trust
Yeah.
because these are typically clients, marketers that have 3 to 4 different ad agencies.
Mm-hmm.
Each agency has the different platform analytics that they're looking at. There's the GA4 that we talked about. And then many of them are also selling stuff in marketplaces as well. So
Yep.
there's usually 10 or 11 different sources of truth and none of them add up and none of them make sense. And the problem for the CMO is that when it comes to budget time, it's almost impossible to have a realistic conversation about numbers with the CFO because as the CMO, sorry, with the CFO, because your numbers don't match at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah.
And it's very tough to go in and say, hey, I really want to do some CTV. I'd like to put, $1 million a month in CTV. And the CFO says, okay, well, where is that on this GA4 report? Oh, it's not there.
Yeah.
So what we do is that the problem that we solve is that we solve similar to the same problem that got me into this. You've got multiple people claiming credit for the same sale. We're able to unite and deduplicate everything, have it make sense so the numbers line up, but then also predict where they should spend their next marketing dollar in order to improve their ROI. And that's really the key is that I need a single source of truth within an organization in order for you to grow the organization.
Yeah, it's true. And I think the other problem is GA4 in itself is not easy to use. Like it's complicated. I don't think Google got it right, but that's just my opinion. I know a lot of um, advertisers and web people are moving to third-party analytics tracking because GA4 is such a mess. Do you have any thoughts around that, or do you have an opinion?
I think for to understand why GA4 is where it is you have to go back to understand what GA4 is at its
Yeah,
core.
yeah,
At its core, it's a great web analytics product, meaning it's really good at telling you how people came to your website
hmm
and good at telling you what they did on your website. Probably not as good as some of the newer tools, but the source of GA was a company called Urchin,
yeah,
which was a free web analytics product. And that's most people don't know today that UTM actually stands for Urchin Tracking Module. It was part of the
yeah,
original code, and Google kept it in there, and it's still in there because UTM had become synonymous with marketing speak these days.
yeah. It
But
is.
but they kept the same kind of main functionality. The problem for Google, though, is that, if all Google did was analytics and web analytics or measurement, I'm
Mhm.
sure they would do a killer job. I have
Yeah,
no doubt about that. They have some of the smartest minds in the world working there. The problem is that they have all these other products. And as you mentioned about the antitrust, there's so much conflict that's going on. And because of privacy concerns, are they sampling? Are they actually looking at the real numbers? And
yeah,
and the other problem is that for e-commerce, who are the predominant users of this, e-commerce has expanded across all these other marketplaces. And you could, and that makes sense for
mm,
folks that are selling products, but you could also even talk about, because I know you're very familiar with the hotel industry.
yeah,
You have a website that is your own website. Okay, you can do GA on that, but you also get a lot of bookings that come from third-party sites. Well,
yeah,
you can't get any GA information from there. So you're in a lot of bookings come from there, a huge number. So how do you account for those in the big picture of things? So
mm,
now you're stuck with these separate silos, and then it's very difficult to try to figure out where you spend your next dollar. Do you spend it to drive people to your website? Do you spend it on branding? Do you spend it to drive people to like a booking.com? What do
yeah,
you do?
yeah,
And that's where GA4, and now GA4, you go back 8 years ago, you could argue that GA was a great digital analytics product. But now, with the growth of CTV and podcast advertising, a lot of digital analytics or a lot of digital marketing is not click-based and doesn't fit into the GA4 grouping. That's why I
yeah,
like to call it Google's analytics, not Google Analytics, because everyone, if I said to everyone, guess what? Facebook is now allowing you to measure Google. No one would trust it. They're like, I don't trust Facebook to measure
yeah.
Google.
That's
But
true.
why do we trust Google to measure Facebook? It doesn't make sense. But it's because that's what most marketers were trained on. They were trained on GA in college, and that's why
Yeah,
people use it.
yeah, it's true. And the things with the advent of things like podcasting and podcasting advertising, people don't understand that you can't track that the same way. Like it's a as a podcaster, I can tell you it's a convoluted mess to say the least. I mean, and
But
that's
it's very
because
it's very similar though to how things were before digital,
yeah,
because before digital, a brand would put out all these messages, TV, print, radio, direct mail, none of which had a trail that you could track directly to have someone come in your store and purchase. And yet brands
yeah,
somehow or another were able to survive because they used math and statistics,
yeah,
which works to be able to say, okay, do more of this. This is what worked.
yeah. I have to ask you, has AI convoluted or made this more of a mess or made it easier?
Well, we use some AI in our product. We like to say it's more intelligent automation than it
Yeah,
is AI itself. But what we use is that when we built the product out, once the data has been QA'd by our QA team that goes into the product, there's a four-part process that the machine does. And we would have it stop at each step, and then a human would analyze the results and then decide what step it goes through next and what needed to be done. And we trained AI to be able to do the intelligent automation process. Again, it's a trained AI that is
Mhm.
part of the platform. I think that most marketers today have somewhat unrealistic expectations of what AI can do, but
Yeah.
I have seen some really good uh, data sets that have been uploaded to AI that marketers are getting great reports for. So I think in terms of reports, I think it's really good because essentially most of the AI bots today are just essentially great writing machines.
Yeah, that's
Um,
true.
I think most marketers though have to be careful though when you're uploading to make sure that that data doesn't go anywhere else. That if they're going to upload something to a chat GPT or a Claude or God forbid a deep
Deep
seek,
seek. Yeah.
yeah, to make sure that you're using a product where there's guarantees that the data doesn't go elsewhere,
Yeah.
because otherwise it could cost you your job, you
I
know?
can guarantee if you're using DeepSeek, it's going elsewhere. That's
Yes. Yeah, a
that's pretty
thousand
well the
percent.
norm, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I get that. I know we're chuckling, but privacy is an issue. So, like the serious side of it is you got to be aware of that. Um, Cookies. We were talking earlier. There's this whole movement to get rid of cookies. Google's been back and forth on this one. The EU is back and forth on this one. I'm sure in North America we're back and forth on this one. I don't think all cookies are bad, first of all. I'll break it down in a simplistic way. I read the news every day, and one of the things I use is Google Newsreader. And the nice thing about Google Newsreader is it feeds me ads, and not ads, it feeds me articles based on what my reading habits. So I can tell you this morning I woke up and there were 4 Formula 1 articles in my feed because I'm a F1 fan and I read all about F1. That's one of the things I do. Um, it will feed you a few of the top political stories, whether we like them or not. But I don't get as many as other people because, frankly, I don't read them. So there is that good use of cookies. Um, is it making it harder to track analytics if we do away with cookies, or do we just need to find another way to do it?
Well, I think getting rid of cookies is actually a really good thing for marketers.
Okay.
Um, so and cookies have been on their way out for a long time. That
Yep.
iOS update stopped a lot of it. Cookies have not worked. And what we're actually talking about are the third-party cookies, which are the
Yes.
cookies that you across different sites.
Hmm.
So it's a good thing because marketers have gotten, I think, lazy.
Yeah.
They, and this going back to what we talked about with marketers believing clicks lead to sales, as opposed to being the longer part of a process. Marketers have believed that the way to win in marketing is that the way that things were done before digital was just stupid. That it was stupid to send these messages out to a broad audience, that the way to do it is to be smart and hyper target. And we can do that because these third-party cookies allow us to buy these specific segments.
Yep.
And now what marketers tend to forget is that the more you target, there's the cost to deliver the ad, and then there's a layer on top to the cost of the targeting. What also happens is the more you target, the fewer people you're reaching, and you're further down the funnel. And so
Yep.
you end up spending the majority of your money on the lower part of the funnel, but you're targeting hyper targeted people. But that's how this new generation of marketers believes how marketing works. And what's happened as a result, the research is clear, is that as marketers move their dollars further down funnel, and what has been called an increase in short-termism, you're spending dollars on marketing where you're expected to get a return today or tomorrow
Hmm.
versus more longer-term branding, that ad effectiveness has decreased. So the ads have to work 2 to 3 times harder in order to get the ROI for you, which
Yep.
isn't there. So what's happening now, though, is because of the removal of cookies, which is the result of this move towards privacy, marketers are now seeing that those targets, that hyper targeting, it's not there anymore. What they got
Yeah,
used to is not there.
yeah,
And
of
so
course.
now they're getting scared because they have to buy a broader audience, which increases the reach, the number of people, which is
Yeah,
better for the brand overall. But it also makes marketers start to think and they realize they have to start innovating a little bit more and really focusing more on because when you're hyper targeting, you're hitting people that are actually in market. You're hitting people that are ready to buy because they're at the lower part of the funnel. So all your ads are all about benefits and discounts. And that's what all
hmm,
the ads are today. They're all about, hey, get this at a discount. Here's the benefits.
yeah,
Whereas once you move more up funnel, your ad needs to be more about the brand. It needs to be more creative,
yeah,
needs to be more emotional, tell a bit more of a story. So it's forcing marketers again. This is another change that marketers are going to be forced to do, that they have to start doing what they actually wanted to do when they got into this, which is be the creative person
yeah,
and come up with the big idea. Because the math, which they used to have to worry about because of platforms like Provalytics and others, they don't have to worry about the math anymore. We'll take care of the math. You have to be the one with the big idea.
yeah. It's a good point. I think too many too much marketing is like really bad, and I'm awful. I don't watch a lot of TV. I should say that I stream or I watch sports, and and when the commercial said I walk out of the room. So, but I'm awful. If I'm watching regular TV, I'll sit here and I'll say, "This ad's awful. This ad's awful. This ad's awful. This ad's awful." And I might go through a show, even a big show like the Super Bowl, and I might see one ad I like, and it's like, really, is there no creativity in any of this stuff anymore? And it used to be when they did that's what they would do is they bring ad agencies or testing companies would bring people, a focus group into a room.
Right.
They don't do many of those anymore, believe it or not. They've gone by the wayside. And the problem with that is you're not even hearing what the population likes. So how can you feed ads that are creative if the population's not seeing them ahead of time, right?
No, it's totally true. And, there's other ways to do focus groups. They do them with surveys now,
Yeah.
which are
Yep.
good. But what I find is that most brands are not running as many different versions of their creatives as they
Hmm.
used to 20,
Yep.
25 years ago.
Yep.
And so they're not getting as many signals in order to determine to help them squeeze more out. I mean, when you have the truth is, it's been said, and the research proves this out, 60 to 70% of the effectiveness of ads is not where you buy it, it's what your message is.
Yes.
And that tends to be, whereas this whole new generation of marketers, it's all about, oh, it's Facebook, it's TikTok, it's this, it's that. It's like, no, it's your message. The
Yeah.
messaging is what really matters more than anything else.
Yeah. And the problem you got to be so careful of is if the rules are changing. Um, Facebook, the rules change on running ads every week. I don't even want to talk about it anymore. It's gotten so bad. TikTok, I can tell you, I don't know how much I'd be putting money in there until the Department of Justice, European Union, and Canada, and a few other countries decide what they're going to do. So that could go by the wayside in the Western world very quickly. We don't know.
Right.
And and the problem is we're putting money and looking into stuff based on what's working, but what's working today doesn't necessarily work tomorrow. In terms of analytics, which networks you guys must have some global view show that they're actually working? Can you say, or do you have any concept of what's working and what's not?
Yeah, I'd say there's a couple that are, probably not surprising, but I think would be scratchers for some.
Yeah.
Uh, First off, X, because it is so, dare I say, some of it is inflammatory, but there's so much
Hmm.
attention on X that the audience and the responsiveness that we see on there is at the same level as we see in linear television buys.
Okay.
So it's incredibly, incredibly powerful. So that's amazing. Reddit
Yeah.
is absolutely positively incredible as well. And those two, it's not a click-based thing at all. It's now they both have things that you can click on, but what ends up happening is just like you said, Rob, someone reads something on X, they become aware of it, and then they go
Yeah.
on throughout their day, and then maybe that day or the next day, then they'll do a search on something, and then they'll
Yep.
end up in that funnel to purchase. But what we find is when brands do a buy on X, and we're seeing more of them do it, it builds up that kind of upper funnel awareness that we would typically see in television, which is
Yep.
pretty powerful.
Yep.
And so again, the other one is Reddit. We haven't seen much with App Loving. App Loving is a new platform that is dealt into directly involved with games.
Yep.
I haven't seen much growth from that with our clients, but also connected television, video, these things just do really, really well. But these are all of these things that I'm mentioning, they would not show any positivity at all in Google Analytics. These are all what I would say is impression-based media, and which
Yes.
takes time to have an impact, but it's something that can definitely be felt.
Yeah, it's so true. It's interesting because I still would, and be fair, I'm not to crush on analytics, but analytics don't always tell the whole story, right? You know that. I mean,
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. If you're a company and you're spending money on ads, we know one of the most expensive platforms out there is LinkedIn. We know that for fact. Cost per click on LinkedIn, it's often 4 to 5 times any other network at least. And people say, why? Well, LinkedIn is one of the only platforms that will let you target a LinkedIn person based on their job title. And that's important because if you're trying to get in front of CFOs or CEOs, you can say only run these ads to without breaking it down to CEOs. And that can be really key. And the thing with that is, so what I'm suggesting is maybe the analytic numbers aren't high. But you might be hitting your target market because you're drilling it down a little faster. Is there any thoughts on that?
Well, there's also all these other socioeconomic conditions that go on
Yes.
in the world as well. You
Yep.
know, interest rates can go up, people don't buy as much.
Hmm.
There's other aspects that we bring into our platform, things like seasonality. Brands have a certain time of year when the season is hot, people are
Yep.
buying. And so it's important to recognize, well, our ads look like they're working, but how much of these ads are due to the fact that people were going to buy anyway? And that's an important concept in
Yep.
analytics called incrementality, meaning what actual impact are these ads having? If I were to turn the ads off, how many of these sales would I actually get without the ads? And our
Yep.
platform measures that automatically. That's built into our platform, but that's something you don't see in Google Analytics. GA is just a counter. Our
Yeah.
platform is more based on what we would say is the incremental impact of each specific ad. But there's a lot of things that go on. I mean, COVID was one of these strange things that totally changed consumer behavior.
No
And let's
question.
not forget, you could be going along doing really, really well, and then all of a sudden a new competitor comes along
Yep.
and starts bidding against you and has a more compelling, more emotional offer. All of a sudden, your ads that were working really, really well don't work as well when this
Yep.
particular competitor is in market. So there's a lot of other things that can have an impact without a doubt.
Yeah, there's no question. In your market seasonality, right away, retail comes to mind because in the retail industry, we know a lot of retail companies do 50%, if not more, of their business between September and December every year. We know that. I mean
That's
that,
right.
and I'm not throwing that number out there. That's the number that's out there, and they because of Christmas, and that's just the reality of it. So
That's absolutely right.
yeah, and then the question is, are those ads working? Now, it's funny. I was thinking about that while you were talking, and I was thinking about the Christmas season. And those who don't know, there's a company in Canada called Canadian Tire. They're basically they started as a hardware store, but they're like a catch-all with hardware now, and they're kind of everywhere. And they ran these ads, TV ads back in the day, and they still do, called say save like Scrooge, give like Santa. So
Hmm.
that's their campaign. And I would bet those ads made a difference just because of the creativity involved. But then you look at a lot of um, companies' creativity, and it's changed. And retail changed so much. I mean, you've got big players out of the game, like Sears is gone now, and you've got you're about to see Hudson Bay in Canada go in the next 2 months by the wayside, and that landscape has changed because a lot of these companies, A, they don't know what their numbers are, but B, they don't know how to adjust, and that's bigger. That's a whole new issue out there to the economics, and I'll bet you e-commerce analytics have gone sky high in the last 5 years since the start of COVID. I prepared to bet money on it. I expected it to go that way, but not as fast as it did.
Yeah, and you hit on something really big there, which is that the larger the company,
Yep.
the harder it is to make a change. That, imagine a big, huge ship trying to turn quickly. They can't do it. And this is why startups have a major competitive advantage. And you say to yourself, well, why is it that a huge company would go out and buy, like I read today that PepsiCo is buying this new health soda called Poppy.
Yeah, I heard
And
that. Yeah,
and
from
they got
first.
rid of they're getting rid of their own that they put in market to try to compete with them. Why are they doing this? They have enough people, but they do, but to get their company and get everyone at their company behind a new initiative and move as quickly, they can't because
Yeah,
they are not willing. The larger companies are substantially risk averse. Startups uh, embrace risk, and
yeah,
in order to become a market leader really fast, you have to love risk. And that's the advantage of a startup is that they can go into a market, they can grab market share very quickly, and then um, the larger kind of big owner of the market can come in and acquire them and then gain that market share. But it's very difficult, especially for these older retailers. They just were not able to move as quickly as the Amazons of the world because the Amazons of the world started digitally and have now moved into retail.
yep. So true. And the other thing too is economic factors are a big one. I don't even want to see with all the tariff mess going on in the world what analytics in the retail industry and the food industry are doing right now. I mean, it's just dramatic, right? What's going on, and I don't even want to turn this into a political show because that's a recipe for disaster. But it's a mess, and that's the reality of it all.
Well,
Is there,
luckily for me and my clients, that falls into the lap of the CFO, not the CMO.
yes, so true. Does that is there any does your product even manage like third party ad networks? So we always think of ad networks like Facebook and Google and Reddit and TikTok and X, but there's a lot of third party networks out there. Do you get into measuring those, or are they just kind of on their own?
No, we measure everything that a customer of ours is spending dollars on. So
Okay.
everything from the very, very small to the very, very large. And then once that process is done, where it's all part of kind of this source of truth, then we look to see, are there other areas where there's people on the team devoted to? So for example, most of our clients have a large internal organic social team.
Yep.
And so we will then work with them to get all of that data into the model. And then there's usually a CRM team. We'll bring that data in. And for our larger clients, they also have external public relations team. So
Yep.
we'll bring that data into the model as well too.
Yep.
So we take everything in because again, this is a mathematical model. It's a perspective, a viewpoint on what's going on. We never say that this is 100% accurate because it isn't, even though the model predicts it's a model. What we say is what we're doing is less wrong than what they're doing now. And
Yeah,
and we try to bring in these other factors because every month we want to be less wrong than we were
yeah,
the month.
I hear you on that one. That's a good point. Um, do clients actually read the reports? So I ask that fairly because I think it's easy for a CMO to say, give me a report. So he's got something in front of him to say, hey, I got this, I'm spending this money here and I've got this wonderful report here. I don't know. I find a lot of clients don't always read the reports or don't know how to read the important stuff on the reports. What's your take on reporting?
Yeah, I mean, for us, we deliver our data in dashboards. We
Good.
have kind of a a format that we utilize. But
Hmm.
one of the things that's unique about the service side of what we provide is that we work hand in hand with our clients to make sure that these dashboards are answering the questions that they have. Because remember,
Yeah.
this is a single source of truth. So first, we produce the dashboards for the internal marketing team, the folks who brought us in. Because first, there's like this, oh my God, this is completely different than we're used to. So we work with them to where they understand it. And then they start to log in and they're logging in, looking at this data. This becomes their view of the world. Then they work with an agency, and then we create a view so that agency can log in and they only see their own data, even though
Okay.
because they work in a silo, but it's their piece of things. So now we
Mm.
have all the agencies that are using this as their source of the truth. And then we work with that internal marketing team to create a view for their boss and their boss's boss based upon the data that they're looking
Okay.
for.
Good.
So these are higher level, and we customize it so that this becomes something that everyone is looking at, but they're looking at their own piece and it's giving them, hey, this report is what I use for my monthly report. And they can take a screenshot, pop it right in their report, makes it really easy.
Yeah. And then you're not giving them all the extraneous data that they really don't care to see. And that's a big deal because I think too many times people who measure analytics or numbers just throw everything at them to say, here it is. And that's not really what they're looking for. They're looking for targeted stuff. They want to see specifics, right?
Well, historically, the way this stuff is delivered in like a 300-page PowerPoint. Who's
Yeah.
gonna who's gonna shift through that stuff? How does that become actionable for me? And that's really the key is that if your analytics provides you information and you don't act on it, then why are you spending the money or the time to even
Yeah.
deal with it? It needs to be something that moves you in a certain direction. That's always been my philosophy on it.
No, I wholeheartedly agree with you. It's been great conversation. If somebody wants to find out more about your platform or about you, what's the best way to get that information?
The best way is to go to provolytics.com. There's actually a demo there that they can watch. We do them a couple times a week. And then if they want to connect with me personally, they can find me on LinkedIn as well.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Have yourself amazing days. Really appreciate the conversation.
My pleasure, Rob. Thank you.
This podcast has been brought to you by Stunning Digital Marketing, your digital marketing concierge to help the business owner put all his pieces together, whether it's email marketing, WordPress security, WordPress design and development, PPC, and more. Text Stunning Digital Marketing for all your digital marketing needs today. A very special thank you to Jeff for joining me on this edition of the SDM Show. The SDM Show is dedicated to my late father, Bruce Cairns. Dad, I miss you very much every day. My mother, Ann Cairns, who's still doing really well and is an inspiration. And of course, Tiz Maroney. And Tiz, I know I've said it, but thank you so much for all the inspiration you give me every day.